Hey there, glad you could stop by. Grab a seat for a minute. I want to show you something that honestly blew my mind. Take a look at this leaf. By all rights, this time of year, it should be absolutely smothered in aphids. You know how it goes. One day everything is lush and green, the next it's curled, sticky, and crawling. But look closer. Not a single bug on it. Now, I didn't use any of those harsh synthetic sprays that make you want to hold your breath, and I didn't fuss with those tacky yellow traps that always end up stuck to my sleeves instead of the pests. What I used is a simple 3-ingredient mix that folks were actually writing down on clay tablets 4,000 years ago. It sounds like a tall tale, I know. But here's the kicker. Back in the mid-90s, shifts in pesticide registration economics basically sidelined this method in favor of patented commercial formulas. It's why you won't hear a peep about it at the local extension office anymore. After I posted my last video, my inbox was overflowing. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What can I actually use instead of that expensive chemical jug sitting in my garage? If you're tired of guessing and want straightforward, dirt under the fingernails fixes that actually work, go ahead and tap subscribe. We're building a quiet corner of the internet for growers who prefer proven methods over glossy marketing. So, I did some digging. I went back through the old agricultural bulletins, the stuff they don't print anymore, and what I found really changed my perspective on spring gardening. This isn't some woo-woo folklore. It's grounded in real plant biology and decades of field trials. It only takes 3 things you probably already have in the pantry or the backyard shed, and one very specific window of time to let it sit and do its thing. Honestly, the main reason it faded from the mainstream is simple. You can't patent it. And if companies can't put a label on it and charge you $20 a bottle, they aren't going to push it. Stick with me for a minute. It doesn't matter if you're tending a huge plot out in the country or just a couple of raised beds on the patio because you're tired of constant weeding. Whether you're dealing with the humidity down south or a short growing season up in the Pacific Northwest, this works. Before we start mixing, I want you to drop your USDA hardiness zone in the comments right now. I'm tracking where everyone is gardening this season, and I'll be tailoring next week's pest calendar to match your local climate. Now, let's pull back the curtain on exactly how this disappeared from the books, and how one little policy change almost erased 4,000 years of common sense from our garden sheds. Now, I know we're going to get into the history of all this eventually, but I want to stop and talk about why this actually works in your backyard today. Most of the stuff you buy at the big box stores treats bugs like enemies you have to go to war with. But this approach, it's different. It's more like putting up a no vacancy sign. We're using 3 simple tricks that work together to create a wall the bugs just won't cross. Pause for a second and grab a notebook because this next part changes how you'll think about pest control forever. The first layer, the ash soak. Think about the ash from your fireplace or a clean wood stove. If you take that untreated hardwood ash, sift it real fine, and let it sit in a bucket of rainwater for a couple of days, something interesting happens. The water becomes highly alkaline. Now, soft-bodied insects like aphids, spider mites, and those tiny caterpillars have very thin exoskeletons. They've got microscopic pores that help them stay hydrated. When you spray that ash water on your leaves, it doesn't poison them. It traditionally disrupts their ability to hold on to moisture. It's like us trying to walk through a room full of static electricity or desert dry air. It's just plain uncomfortable. They can't feed, they can't settle in, and pretty soon they pack up and leave. You aren't dumping chemicals on your tomatoes. You're just making the neighborhood somewhere they don't want to live. The second layer, the smell test. Plants are constantly talking to bugs. They send out volatile organic compounds, little scent signals that tell a beetle, "Hey, dinner is over here," from half a mile away. This second layer is all about a clever bait and switch. If you take some strong-smelling herbs, stuff like tansy, wormwood, or yarrow, and crush them into that ash water, you're creating a natural scent barrier. When that mix dries on your plants, it masks the come-and-get-it smell of your crops. Research suggests cucumber beetles and aphids avoid treated plants not because they're scared, but because the scent trail gets scrambled. To them, your prize-winning veggies just smell like the wild edges of a forest. He'll just keep on flying. Quick question before we move on.
When was the last time you checked the weather before spraying a treatment? Because if you skip the timing, even the best recipe fails. Let's fix that.
The third layer, getting the timing right. You want to apply this in the late evening when the night-active pests are just waking up, and then again right at dawn, before the daytime crew gets started. When it dries, it leaves behind this tiny invisible mineral film. It'll stay put through a light sprinkle and keep working for nearly 2 weeks. That's just long enough to outlast the entire life cycle of those early summer pests. One simple routine, 3 ways to protect your plants, and not a single drop of synthetic poison in sight. The best part? People were doing this exact thing 4,000 years ago. They didn't have fancy lab coats, but they sat on their porches, watched the seasons change, and figured out what worked. They just passed that wisdom down, neighbor to neighbor, just like we're doing now. Look, knowing the history of this stuff is great for a trivia night, but it doesn't do a lick of good for your tomatoes unless you actually have a batch of it mixed up. The good news? Making it is a whole lot simpler than trying to read the fine print on those chemical jugs at the big box stores. You only need 4 things. First, get some sifted hardwood ash, and I mean the real stuff from a clean wood fire. Not those charcoal briquettes from last night's cookout, and absolutely not scrap pressure-treated lumber or painted wood. Keep it clean and untreated. Second, you'll need 3 parts rainwater. If you're pulling from the tap, let it sit out overnight so the chlorine evaporates, or run it through a basic filter. Third, 2 parts dried tansy or wormwood by volume. You can grow these yourself, forage them responsibly, or pick them up at a local herb shop. Finally, grab some pure, unscented liquid Castile soap. You only need about 1 teaspoon per finished gallon. That's the whole list. No lab coat, no fancy chemistry set required. Here's exactly how you put it together. Grab a food-safe 5-gallon bucket and mix 1 cup of sifted ash with 3 cups of rainwater. Give it a thorough stir until it's fully worked in, then cover it loosely and walk away for 12 hours. Let the heavy sediment settle while you're busy with something else. Once the time's up, carefully strain that clear liquid through an old cheesecloth or a fine mesh bag into a clean container. Leave the gritty sludge at the bottom. That's your compost's friend, not your sprayer's. Next, toss in 2 cups of your crushed tansy or wormwood and let it sit in a cool, shaded spot for exactly 48 hours. Now, don't worry about the outdoor temperature. Spring weather's gonna do what it wants anyway. But do keep an eye on the clock. That 48-hour window is the sweet spot. It gives those natural potassium salts just enough time to bond with the herbal oils without turning too harsh and burning your tender new leaves. After those 2 days are up, strain it one final time into your sprayer. Here's the crucial step most people skip. Stir in that 1 teaspoon of Castile soap per gallon of finished mix. The soap isn't there to keep it fresh. It's what we call a sticker spreader. It breaks the surface tension so the spray actually coats the undersides of leaves in a nice thin film instead of just beating up and rolling right off onto your shoes. If you have any left over, pour it into an old opaque jug, keep the lid tight, and store it out of direct sun. It'll stay effective for about 3 weeks without needing refrigeration. The beauty of this mix is that you don't need 5 acres and a tractor to make it work. It's just as effective on a few patio pots or a balcony railing as it is on a full garden plot. If you've got a picky HOA or neighbors who mind everyone's business, don't sweat it. It looks and smells just like regular compost tea. It's generally considered gentle on soil life, and when it eventually washes away, it returns trace calcium and potassium back to your beds. It's a win-win. Quick but important note before you head out, always test a single leaf first. Even natural solutions can react differently depending on your plant variety and local water hardness. Spray 1 leaf, wait 24 hours, and check for any discoloration. If it looks good, you're clear to treat the rest. Remember, this is a preventive and disruptive protocol, not a nuclear option for heavy infestations. Fix the root cause first, and this mix will keep the rest at bay. We often think we're the first generation to deal with a bad aphid season, but the truth is, folks have been fighting those exact same battles since long before our grandparents' time. I'm talking way back, 4,000 years ago, over in the Fertile Crescent. Those early farmers were standing in the dirt, looking at the same bug-eaten crops we do, And they didn't just guess. They took notes. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments from around 1700 BCE detailing a simple botanical rinse. 1 part wood ash, 3 parts river water. Let it steep. Add crushed tansy at daybreak. Apply at dusk. Some might call that a tall tale, but field trials and historical cross-references show nearly identical ratios preserved across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and eventually medieval Europe. It wasn't a fluke, it was a proven, repeatable system. What those old-school growers understood without a microscope. Ash shifts the leaf surface, pH, creating an environment soft-bodied pests traditionally avoid. And tansy? That plant is naturally packed with volatile oils that help confuse foraging insects. They didn't have a lab, they had the seasons. They tested, tracked, and passed it on. Quick pause. If this worked so well for so long, why did it fade from the mainstream? The answer isn't a conspiracy, it's economics. In the mid-90s, updates to federal pesticide registration guidelines significantly raised the financial bar for getting any product officially registered. For large agrochemical companies with patented lab-synthesized formulas, that was just the cost of doing business. But you can't patent wood ash, you can't trademark rainwater or claim exclusive rights to wild tansy. Nature already owns those. So from a strictly commercial standpoint, there was zero financial incentive for any company to spend $500,000 registering a free garden shed recipe. And that's when the old ways started disappearing from official channels. University extension offices began shifting their recommendation sheets away from DIY botanical mixes. They weren't banned, they were just quietly reclassified as historical curiosities, while newly synthesized options received fast-tracked approvals. But here's the silver lining: this protocol never actually died. It survived because growers who cared more about bushel yields than brand names kept their hands in the dirt. The Amish, independent homesteaders, and old-school master gardeners never stopped using these mixes. They measured success by the health of their soil and the taste of their harvest. They kept the fire burning. And honestly, looking at how much everything costs these days, I think a lot of folks are finally ready to take that knowledge back into their own hands. So now that you know why this was quietly sidelined, let's talk about the part that actually matters: how to apply it without wasting a drop or stressing your plants. Because timing isn't a suggestion here. It's the entire difference between a clean garden and a frustrated afternoon. Here's the deal: you want to wait for that quiet window in the late evening. Wait until the sun finally dips behind the tree line and that midday heat starts to break, ideally when the air temperature cools below 75 degrees. This is when the night shift pests begin stirring. I'm talking about squash, vine borers, cutworms, and those persistent aphids that multiply fastest when the air is still. You need to give this mix about 6 to 8 hours of calm, dry conditions to properly adhere to the foliage. If you get impatient and spray at high noon, the sun can actually bake that alkaline solution onto the leaf surface and stress the tissue. And for heaven's sake, check your local forecast first. If there's a heavy rain front moving in within 24 hours, keep the sprayer in the shed. You're looking for a clear, dry window of at least 2 full days. Trust me, your back and your schedule will thank you for not having to do the job twice. Quick pro tip: most labels ignore soil temperature matters more than air temperature. Keep a simple dial thermometer in the dirt near your beds. The very day that soil consistently hits 55 degrees Fahrenheit, that's your biological starting line. That's the exact wake-up call for overwintering mite and aphid eggs that have been dormant in the soil and leaf litter. If you wait until you actually see a full-blown infestation, you're already playing catch-up. But if you apply this mix right when the soil warms up, you help break the breeding cycle before it gains momentum. One thorough soak, covering both the tops and undersides of the leaves, and you're generally set for about 10 to 14 days of quiet growth. That's just long enough to outlast the entire life cycle of those early summer pests. And please mark your calendar or set a phone reminder, that 48-hour steep time we talked about earlier. It's non-negotiable. Rush it and the herbal oils won't fully infuse. Leave it sitting for a week and it can start to ferment and lose potency. Precision matters here, and your plants will show you the difference. One last timing note. This mix works best as a preventive shield, not a rescue treatment. If you're already seeing heavy infestation, pair this with manual removal, like a strong blast of water from the hose or hand picking the worst of it, and then use this mix to keep the survivors from bouncing back. Think of it like building a fence instead of fighting a war every weekend. It's about creating an environment where pests struggle to establish themselves in the first place. Now let's have an honest conversation about what this mix can and can't do. I want you to get the best results possible, so I'll be straight with you. This is a preventive and disruptive protocol, not a nuclear option. It won't magically wipe out a severe, heavy infestation overnight. If your plants are already covered, you'll need to pair this spray with manual removal, like a strong blast of water from the hose or hand picking the worst of it, and then use this mix to keep the survivors from bouncing back. Think of it like building a fence instead of fighting a war every weekend. Another quick pro tip that changes everything. Always start with the soil. This spray works best when your garden is already fed with good compost and watered consistently. Stressed plants naturally release more volatile compounds that can actually attract pests, so fixing the root cause always comes first. Feed the soil, and the plants take care of the rest. And don't overlook the ecosystem balance. This mix is generally considered gentle on earthworms, ladybugs, and bees when applied at dusk or dawn, because those beneficial insects aren't actively foraging on your foliage at those hours. That's one of the biggest advantages over broad-spectrum synthetics. You're protecting your crops without wiping out the natural predators that help keep your garden in balance. You'll also notice the cost factor. When you're mixing this at home, you're looking at pennies per gallon compared to the $20 or $30 you'd spend on a commercial bottle. That's money that stays in your pocket, which matters more than ever right now. You aren't just saving money. You're reclaiming a skill set that was quietly taken for granted. You're learning to read your garden again, to work with the seasons instead of against them, and to trust your own hands. That's the kind of independence that doesn't show up on a receipt, but it shows up in every harvest. Honestly, at the end of the day, we aren't just out here fussing over tomato worms, or trying to keep the aphids from ruining the roses. There's something a whole lot deeper going on. Every time you mix up a batch of this in your own kitchen or garden shed, you're doing more than just saving a plant. You're stepping back into a rhythm that existed long before us, that our grandparents lived by every single day. Think back to how they did things. They didn't go running to the big box store for a plastic bottle of chemicals every time a leaf looked a little peaked. They knew how to read the sky. They kept their preserving jars ready in the cellar, and they knew how to fix what was broken with whatever was sitting in the shed. They didn't need a screen to tell them when to plant. They could just feel it in the air. Watch the birds and notice the change. And notice when the forsythia finally bloomed. Quick question. When was the last time you did something in the garden? Purely because you knew it worked, not because an ad told you to? When you take charge of your own patch of dirt like this, you're basically telling the world you don't need to rely on fragile supply chains or pay inflated prices just to have something healthy to eat. It's a weight off your shoulders, isn't it? Knowing you've got it handled. Plus, it's a lot easier on the joints when you aren't constantly hauling heavy bags of store-bought amendments from the car to the curb. The truth is, you don't need a chemistry degree to grow good food. You just need a little dirt under your fingernails. It just takes a willingness to observe and learn, and the patience to trust what's been working quietly for thousands of years. By the time you pass these little tricks down to the grandkids, or even just share them with a neighbor over the fence, you're giving them something way better than a store receipt. You're giving them a blueprint for self-reliance. You're showing them that good things still come from careful hands. Quiet observation and respect for the natural world. That's the real payoff. It's not just about a bug-free garden. It's about remembering who we are when we step outside. Now, I'd genuinely love to hear how things are looking in your neck of the woods. Go ahead and drop a comment down below with your USDA hardiness zone, and tell me which pest is currently giving you the most grief. Whether it's those persistent Japanese beetles on your roses, or squash bugs trying to take over the patch, or early season cutworms nipping your seedlings at the base. I want to hear about it. I actually read through every single reply, and your comments directly shape what we cover next. So if you haven't yet, tap that subscribe button. We're building a quiet little corner of the internet For gardeners who prefer dirt under their nails to glossy marketing, I'd hate for you to miss the next one. I'm also going to be pinning a comment with a free printable version of this exact ratio and timing guide, so you can keep it on your shed wall or clip it to your garden journal. No email required, just a straightforward reference sheet. And if you've already tried this mix, or if you're planning to test it out this weekend, let me know how it goes. I'll be checking back over the next few days to answer questions, troubleshoot timing issues, and help you dial in the recipe. For your specific climate, this isn't a one-way broadcast. It's a shared project. We're figuring this out together, just like growers have done for generations.